Good morning, everyone. Mike and I just wanted to quickly share with you our new Supplier and Operator Confidence survey. So back in March, I think it was the 19th of March, we ran the survey. We talked to ActiveNet delegates to get their views and feelings about how they were feeling about COVID and what was going to happen. So we felt, as we're coming out of COVID, certainly in England, the gyms are reopened, that we would do another survey to get a feeling for our suppliers and our operators. So good morning, Mike. How are you today?
Morning, Dave. I'm fine. How are you?
Excellent, thanks, Mike. Mike, you said as part of this interview we would go through the results from the previous survey. So what sort of things were the highlights from the last survey?
Yeah, it was really, I mean, it's incredible, first of all, to think it's 4.5, 5 months ago that we did it. But I think when we did do it, we thought that this was going to be a 2 or 3 month thing. Little did we know. So it's really interesting to go back and reflect on that survey. And I think it's important to bear in mind that this is quite a unique survey because we're looking at operators and suppliers. We can split those results out, but it's really interesting to get that complete overview. And I suspect that the figures now are going to be distinctly different to some of the relative optimism that people had 4.5, 5 months ago. So back then, for example, when we asked how significantly your business has been affected by COVID to date, bear in mind it had only been then a few weeks, only 57% people said extremely affected. Another 23% were saying quite affected, and 20% were saying only a little affected. Now I'd be amazed if that's not changed now. And then looking at a bit more long term, we then went on to say, well, how confident are you that your business will survive the next 12 months? And 43% were extremely confident, and another 43% were quite confident. So add those together, what's that? 85% were extremely or quite confident that their business is going to survive. That's got to be a key one to ask again now, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the result mix was, I think we had 2/3 suppliers, because we asked the ActiveNet delegates, and I think we got a response from 2/3 of the suppliers. So it will be interesting, as you say, to compare that supplier and operators, particularly as we've heard the news around DW and around school letting service and a few other operators who are actually really struggling at the moment to find their way. So yeah, I think that number will be really interesting. The bit that I'm quite interested in, because the survey we're going to do is supported by Sport England, by Simpsford, by UK Active and by CLOA. We asked a question about representative bodies and how people were satisfied with the advice and things they were getting for those representative bodies.
We divided that up into two areas, really. First of all, we asked about industry sector, representative organisations, and how good was their support and advice. And then we asked about government supported advice. And again, the figures back then were pretty positive. 33 or a third were saying extremely happy, 57% were saying quite happy. So add those together, that's 90% were either quite or extremely happy with support and advice from the sector. Slightly lower figures when we asked about the government, perhaps not surprisingly. Only 23.8% were extremely happy with government supported advice, and 57% were quite happy. So even back then in those early days, almost 20% of people were saying that they weren't happy with the government advice, but they were relatively happy with the sector organisation. It's obviously been really challenging times for those representative bodies of the sector. It's going to be really interesting to see now, people reflecting back 4.5 months, to see what they're thinking now, Dave.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what's the value from this? Because the reason I wanted to do it is that certainly suppliers and the smaller suppliers, people like us, it has been a really challenging time. We've not been able to invoice. We've carried on letting people use our services, etc. And I just wanted to get a feel for the suppliers, because we hear a lot about the operators and we hear a lot about the customers. We've done some work with the customers, but I just gap around the suppliers. So how can we maximise the opportunity here with suppliers? What are we going to do with the results?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think to a certain extent, suppliers in this mix have been forgotten. I'm hoping that we're going to get a really good representative sample of both operators and suppliers. If we can increase the numbers, we can then divide them up and we can compare them. I suspect as well that it's going to be the small up and coming suppliers that are going to be really struggling, and to a certain extent they're the the lifeblood of innovation in our sector. The bigger companies are going to be able to survive this much better than the smaller companies, but it tends to be the smaller companies that are coming up with those new ideas around marketing, around digital marketing in particular, about mixing up that home gym balance between workouts, all the tracking, monitoring things. They're the companies that are coming up and coming through, and to a certain extent, they're the companies that, in all of the government support that's been offered, some of those really early startups who perhaps aren't even making profit yet have missed out on some of those government support. So I think there's a real risk that we forget about them, and in a year, 2 years' time, we're going to wonder, where's the innovation, where's the new ideas coming through?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, Mike. And and it's also much harder to pivot the business. It's a word I don't like, but that pivot word is much harder when you are a startup, when you've only just got your funding, when you've only just got the backing to be able to do those things. So to be able to change what you do is really quite difficult. So yeah, I'm hoping that this will actually provide a little bit of support for those organizations to say, actually, we're still here, we're still fighting. However, we do need some help, we do need some support. Yeah. And that support from the operators who are struggling, and it also means support from the government, etc. as well, in order to deliver that. Okay, Mike, so a bit of the technical. How are we going to do the survey?
Well, I hope, I think the link's going to be going out in the next couple of days. It's going to be, we've kept it really short and sweet. It's only about 7 or 8 questions. As I say, we're going to be sending it out to operators and suppliers. It's really good that we've got even more industry support for it this time. So organisations, Sport England, UK Active, Simspa, Cloa. Have we heard back from CL UK yet? Still waiting. Still waiting. Hopefully hear back from those guys. So we've pretty much got everyone behind it. So I think the distribution is going to be massive this time. And the way we're going to be getting out to people will be through those organisations. People will just receive an email with a link. The other thing, stress that it's totally anonymous. We're not asking for any financial usage data, but we still decided to make it anonymous. The only reason people might want to give us an email address is at the end of the survey, because we're sending out complimentary copies of the summary report.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point at the end. So if you do need a copy of it, please put your email address at the bottom of the survey. There's a space there for it, and we'll get back to you. But just be assured, we will only use the email address for the survey report. It's not for any other reason. So, okay, brilliant. Well, look, Mike, I'm going to let you get on with the rest of your day. Thank you for your time today, and we will catch up soon. I'm sure we'll do this to share the results as well. All right.
Excellent. Cheers, Dave. Thanks.
Take care.